I'm very honored, very privileged to welcome everyone this morning to our panel discussion. It's one of the 3 events that we've got during this Reconciliation Weeks, and it's going to be exciting. So just before I start, just wanted to ask everyone to turn their cameras off and microphones on mute, please, and keep them as they are during the session. You will have the opportunity to ask questions, and that will be possible using Slido. So in the invitation that was sent to everyone, there is a link and a QR code. So you can ask your question on Slido, and we will have a special time at the end of the session for your questions to be answered. So please don't hesitate to do that. We're really eager to get your questions. So this morning we've got an absolutely fantastic panels with a number of very extraordinary people that have done a lot in their space with their organization for the reconciliation movements. But before I introduce them, I would like to acknowledge the Darug people, and I'm sitting on Darug land today, and I want to pay my respect to the Darug people. I also want to pay my respect to the Darkinjung, the Darwal, and the Gujungura people, and they are the 4 nations that we are operating on as an organization, and it's important to pay our respect to these 4 nations and acknowledge that the land that we are living and working on is a land that we've cared for 60 or 80,000 years. And when we consider how lucky we are to live and work and play and raise our families on this land, this is an absolutely fantastic legacy that they have left us. And if we can contribute today as an organization to continue to work with these 4 nations to continue to care for the land and water, then that's, a very small stone to this big building that these 4 nations have built. I also want to acknowledge all the Aboriginal people around the table this morning and pay my respect to their elders past and present. So we are celebrating Reconciliation Week this week. This is an important time. As you know, this is based on 2 important dates. The Mabo case, which was really a landmark when at last it was recognized that terra nullius was not the right concept. And that's a very important recognition for the Aboriginal nation. And the second date that we are celebrating is the Sorry Day, the apology speech from Prime Minister Rudd in 2008, which was also a very important acknowledgement of our past history. This year, the theme of Reconciliation Week is more than words, and this is really important because we're talking about reconciliation, but the most important is not only to talk about it, but is really to translate that into action. And this is something that we have committed to do as an organization, and that's about us as an organization helping our people and helping our communities to translate our words into action. I'll stop talking here, and I would like to introduce now our panel. And as I said, we've got people that have got a very important contribution to their organization. So I will start with Kath Brockenborough. Kath is a proud Wiradjuri woman from Central West New South Wales, and she's the executive lead for First Nation engagement and reconciliation at Lendlease. Sorry, can I ask everyone to mute their microphone, please? Sorry, so Kath at Lendlease, she has led the development and implementation of 3 reconciliation action plans, including the latest one, which is at an Elevate level RAP. Kath has more than 30 years of construction and property industry management experience, including 26 years at Lendlease. And her experience includes construction, risk, environment, heritage and safety management, learning and development management, and mentoring women and First Nation businesses in the industry. Kath is chair of the Australian Indigenous Leadership Centre, a member of the Queensland Building and Construction Commission Board and People and Culture Committee Chair, and a graduate and member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So welcome, Kath. We have also Neil Birchall. Neil has extensive experience in the operations and maintenance business, which has been gained from work in both the public and the private sector. His various roles have given him extensive knowledge in both the strategic and operational excellence and service delivery. As an operationally focused person, Neil has taken his knowledge gained in operations and translated that into his current role, which looks at the strategy, systems and governance associated with the delivery of global excellence across the business. In more recent times, Neil led the development of Broad Spectrum and Ventia relationship management, community engagement, and Indigenous participation program. Welcome, Neil. We have also with us Kate Delaney. Kate is a program manager with Reconciliation Australia and has provided guidance and feedback on development of Sydney Water's reconciliation action plans. Kate joined Reconciliation Australia in 2017. Welcome, Kate. And we've got Emma Pryor. So our very own Emma Pryor leads, as you know, a very large team of development and delivery specialists committed to creating the assets that's required to realize Sydney Water Services outcome and Sydney Water vision. And as you all know, Emma is also the chair of our Reconciliation Committee. So welcome, Emma. So thank you all for joining us this morning. You have had an absolutely interesting and fulfilling careers, and you've achieved a lot in reconciliation, in the reconciliation space. So I've got a few questions that I would like to ask you individually, and then we will have time at the end of the session for some questions from the audience. So let's start our questions. So Kate, my first question is for you. In the State of Reconciliation reports, there was a call for braver reconciliation action plans. So what does exactly that mean for organization, a braver reconciliation action plan?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I'd just like to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you from Gadigal land today, the beautiful land on which I'm very privileged to live and work every day. So the State of Reconciliation in Australia report is a report that we release every 4 years. It really highlighted in the report that we released earlier this year, really highlighted that the reconciliation movement is at a tipping point and that we as a nation really need to move from safe to brave and raise the bar on action. And for the 1,100 or so, probably closer to 1,200 now actually, RAP organisations that we have in the program, we see that as really kind of speaking up on and engaging with a range of issues, and including tougher issues and demonstrating bravery in that space. So things like constitutional reform, treaties, truth-telling, over-incarceration, children in out-of-home care, and justice reinvestment. A recent example that probably a lot of people joining today would be aware of, because it did draw a lot of media attention, was Cricket Australia, who are a Stretch Wrap partner of ours. They actually removed reference to Australia Day from their cricket games earlier this year on the 26th of January, after consulting with their Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander stakeholders. And most people would be aware of it because they did receive a fair bit of media attention and political backlash for their approach on that. But they really stood firm in light of that political backlash and said that they, wanted to lead the way on some of these conversations and ensure that their games really represented a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. So that's a kind of tangible example that a lot of people would have been aware of. For a lot of other organisations, it could mean other public-facing commitments like supporting key advocacy campaigns, whether that's the Uluru Statement from the Heart or Change the Record or others, and educating staff around these aims as well. And another big finding from the State of Reconciliation in Australia report, where we think brave action is really needed, one of the findings was that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples still experience racism at an unacceptably high rate. And so we really want organisations to be taking bold and brave anti-racism approaches in their organisation. Another sporting reference, but hopefully one that a lot of people would have seen as well in that space, the West Coast Eagles, who are another RAP partner. One of their players was receiving a lot of racist comments on social media, and they actually created a video with their players and staff around anti-racism and actually educating their members and fans about why the words that had been used were offensive to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and really used it as an education campaign. So a lot of people would have seen that on social media. And then I think just really thinking about what brave leadership and brave commitments look like for your industry. So that's something I would really get Sydney Water to reflect on, what it looks like for your organisation.
Thanks, Kate. They are very powerful words that you said, and it's true for probably any organisation that until you've got the difficult conversations and you start discussing the difficult and sensitive issues, then it's not really a commitment. It's not really a progress. So I think it's a very fair call to ask to be brave and to be brave to have a difficult conversation and go into places where our actions can start changing the environment. Thanks, Kate. Next question is for you, Kath. Lendlease is very advanced in their RAP journey. Elevate level RAP is the highest level of reconciliation action plan. So you've achieved a lot in your organisation. What advice could you give every one of us on how we can make sure that the implementation of a reconciliation action plan is really everyone's responsibility in an organisation?
Well, thank you. I think the most important thing is that people understand why are we doing this, both on a macro scale as a society. We can talk about social justice and equity and equality and some big picture reasons, but I think an important driver of success in implementation is what does it mean for your organisation? Why are you doing it? So I think cultural learning and for staff to understand what is the history? Why are we talking about these issues? Are they still modern issues? A lot of people think that it's still something that happened a long time ago and in the past. And why should we worry about this now? They don't understand the current context for many of these issues, and the fact that a lot of that trauma and bad policy has continued on and, you know, created intergenerational problems for First Nations people still today. So I think understanding why in the macro is important, but that business case, why is our organisation doing it? How does it fit into our mission and values? And, you know, what impact does the work that we do have on First Nations people, and what's the role that we have played, and what can we play to improve those issues around equity and equality? So understanding that there is a national conversation too, that, you know, talking about First Nations people and reconciliation adds to our whole shared culture. So it is part of being an Australian to understand and embrace the fact that, you know, this is 65,000 years of history, and the knowledge and the science that was built up, especially around land and water management. You know, when you think of the business that you're in, there's so much that culturally First Nations people can offer to the sort of business that you have. So there is a lot of value in preserving that cultural knowledge and heritage. So I think if people understand the why of it, then they're empowered to take it on. And if you've got the business case right, then people know what they can actually do in their daily lives and in the roles that they play, and it makes it relevant to their job. The other thing we've done, and you know, mind you, we have been working at this 10 years, so, you know, it is a journey. It's not something you can switch on and off. But it's to make sure that you embed this into your normal practices and processes within the organisation to make it sustainable. You can have also KPIs to drive it through the businesses. And I encourage targets. I mean, people get a bit scared about targets. There's often an argument, oh, there's not enough Aboriginal people out there skilled at this work, or there's not enough businesses that we can employ. And there's a whole range of buts that people put out in front. But, you know, to take up what Kate was talking about, being brave, put the flag on the hill. And if you set the targets, you know, you will get there in the long run. You will find ways to do it. And those targets sort of must be meaningful too, you know, and realistic at the same time. So that's just an initial bit of advice. Thanks, Rosh.
Thanks, Kath. And that's very true to say that what gets measured gets delivered. You know, a very traditional say, but that's absolutely true. Exactly the same for Reconciliation Action Plan. I think you started with understanding the why, and I absolutely support that. That's critical. For everything we're doing as an organization, we need to understand why we're doing it, and when we understand it, then it becomes a second nature. So thanks for that, Kath. Neil, next question for you. Relationships are key to the success of any reconciliation action plan. So could you tell us how you have managed your external relationships and stakeholders' expectations? Neil, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I'd also like to pay my respect. I'm meeting on Wurundjeri land in lockdown Melbourne, but great to join you guys. And yeah, look, as you mentioned, Rock, in the introduction of myself, my role is to focus on the strategy, systems and governance. And one of those activities that we are very strong in is the way that we engage with the local community and how we build relationships with those local communities. And we've got a partnership operating with an organisation called Social Compass, and they're a research organisation that operated out of originally Deakin University and then La Trobe University, got purchased by the One Foundation over in the Kimberley, and do a great job. So when we enter a community, we research and profile that community so that we understand exactly what the challenges are that are facing that community. And we acknowledge that every community is different, and we want to really understand what the expectation is as we enter that community, and how do we manage that expectation. And an example of that, you know, we go into some communities and they see a Sydney-based company coming into their small community, and we've got very deep pockets. Well, that isn't the case in the contracting industry, as Kath would be able to ascertain. So we've got to manage that expectation. So we set up our local community engagement plan, and the way we view it is that the research allows us to get it about 80% right and 80% understanding of what's important to that community. And we then undertake, and in doing that process, we identify who the key stakeholders are, right across that, from educational to government to community to suppliers, etc. And then we meet with those key stakeholders and start to build that relationship and understand what their expectations is, how we're going to manage communication with them, what their capabilities are, their expectations, etc. And my team, which is a small team, we will manage that process for usually the first 3 to 6 months that we enter a community. And then we like to transition those activities to our local management, our local team. And there's no doubt in my mind, the best relationships we've got, the best Indigenous participation programs that we've got running are the ones that are managed locally, not the ones that are managed corporately. And look, a really good example of that, Rock, is we've gone into communities where they've openly said to us, we do not want you to, and these are Indigenous communities, we do not want you to employ any of our people. We want you to set up businesses that employ our people. Because we know you as a contractor, you will come and go, as the contracting industry does. But we want sustainable businesses here that can work for the next contractor and the contractor after that. So we've got to be very careful. We don't assume that everyone wants a job. Yes, people do want a job, but maybe not a job with Broad Spectrum or Ventia. So we do manage that. And then we audit that. 6 to 9 months, we do a desktop audit of that, so on the phone, and we check how those relationships are going and are people being met, and then we do an evaluation at the end of that program, and that's done independently by Social Compass, who will talk to the key stakeholders, talk to our clients, talk to our people on site to make sure that the local plan that we've put in place actually is delivering a benefit for both the local community, for Ventia, Broad Spectrum, and also for our host client. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. I really love it when you say don't assume that we know what communities are expecting from us. I think that's an absolutely critical point that you're making here. We're not here to deliver what we want to deliver, but we're here to deliver what communities and customers and clients are expecting us to deliver. And I think being very, very clear about this is critical to success. So great lesson, Neil, here.
Thank you.
Emma, next question for you. And talking or coming back to Sydney Water, how would you describe the level of commitment to reconciliation across Sydney Water?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one, and I think I need to reflect a little bit on a journey, and it will only be the journey as I understand it. I've been with Sydney Water for 5 years, but when I first arrived, I think our commitment very much looked like a bottom-up one. We had a number of people across the business who had a genuine interest in reconciliation, in diversity, inclusion, in recognising and respecting our First Nations people. And somehow they found each other and rallied around to pull together what was our first reconciliation action planning work. And they, what we also saw at that point in time was initiatives, and they still go on today, but grassroots initiatives at local parts of our operations. So everyone's seen the artwork that's been in the foyer recently, but that came out of the Port Kembla team's own passion and drive. The property team were also doing pieces working on country with our land council stakeholders, but it wasn't really an enterprise thing. It was definitely a bottom-up piece. And then a little bit of support was applied in terms of that effort should be part of a broader diversity and inclusion space, but it probably never got the airtime there. There were other matters of diversity and inclusion that maybe were more focused on at that point in time. So somewhere in the last 18 months or so, though, I think there's been a real shift and a meeting, if you like, of the whole business, the enterprise, with that bottom-up energy that was kind of intrinsic in a whole bunch of our staff. And so what I've noticed is that over that last 18 months, as we have made more visible the things that we committed to under our first reconciliation action plan, and then when we've made regular parts of our conversation being acknowledgements of country and discussions about learning about our First Nations caretaking role in terms of water and land management, we've had more people come forward. I get emails quite regularly from folks with suggestions as to how we should profile the artworks from Port Kembla, how we should shape the words we actually use in our acknowledgement of country, who want to participate in career trackers and provide opportunities inside of their part of the business for folks in career trackers, who want to participate in programs designed to reach school level, secondary school level folks, to create a relationship between them and us. And what's happened at the same time, that promotion of visibility that's created more people talking in this space, I think has really come about through an active championing by our executive and by our board of our commitment in this space. In fact, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but in drafting our reconciliation action plan, our board and exec asked to spend a half a day away with us talking through what should our commitment look like. To Kath's point earlier, what difference is Sydney Water going to make? Why is action in this space important to us? And some really clear themes that resonated top to bottom in the organisation came through. A shared sense of having a role in water and land management as a real driver, a social good that can be provided, and a commitment to doing that in a sustainable way, which is consistent with everything we see in the principles of caring for country. And also just a general sense of we are big, we should, because we can, be active in this space, be an active voice. So I feel like there's been a real meeting of the collective minds across the organisation, and the commitment, I think we can probably say, is an organisational one today.
Thanks, Emma. Look, that's music to my ears. I think when you've got a meeting of different minds and a shared ambition to achieve something together, that's when we really can move mountains. So that's a good position to be in. We'll continue with questions, but before I do, I just wanted to remind the audience that if you have any questions for our panel, you can please submit them on Slido, and we'll answer the questions at the end of the session. Kate, I had another question for you. So could you tell us, please, what does true reconciliation look like? And aside from action plans, what other steps can organizations take to show their commitment is real and true?
Yeah, sure. It's a big question, and definitely one that looks a little bit different to everyone. So I would encourage, all of your staff to think about what that kind of ultimate vision for reconciliation looks like for them. But from Reconciliation Australia's perspective, in the 2016 State of Reconciliation in Australia report, we actually identified the 5 dimensions of reconciliation which we think are necessary to achieve reconciliation in Australia. So those are historical acceptance, race relations, equity and equality, institutional integrity and unity. And we really see all these 5 dimensions as interrelated, and that they can't exist in isolation, and that for Australia to achieve reconciliation, we really need progress against all 5 of those dimensions. If anyone's interested, I'd recommend jumping onto our website and having a look at that State of Reconciliation in Australia report, or perhaps it can be circulated in post-event materials, because it really does a deep dive into how far we've progressed as a country, but also the areas which still require so much work, and particularly in the 4 years since the last report. So we released another one earlier this year. In terms of organisations showing a genuine and meaningful commitment to reconciliation, I think one way individuals can really do this is to listen and learn, listen to the voices of your Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander stakeholders, and be willing to learn, but also be willing to unlearn. Our schools team particularly use this term a lot about unlearning things you may have learned, which may be incorrect. So be willing to unlearn as well as learn. Also be I guess prepared to consider what your individual or your organisational role is in tough issues affecting First Nations people, and how you might support, or equally how you might be contributing to issues that are impacting First Nations people negatively as well. And I think finally, one other way that organisations can really demonstrate a meaningful commitment is to make sure that their RAP is a real kind of living and breathing document, and that their commitments are dynamic. They can respond to urgent community needs or moments in time. And one thing we really saw, and Neil and Kath would have seen as well during COVID, was the ability of our organisations in the RAP program to really respond to urgent community needs. We saw some organisations making sure that supply chain issues were kind of navigated so they could get urgent supplies into remote communities, others doing kind of COVID packs, like grocery packs and things. And it was really awesome to see that they weren't constrained by the commitments that were in their RAP 3 years ago, and they could just kind of pivot and deliver these services, which was really fantastic for me to see. And for me, that was a really good indication of an organisation that is really putting community needs at the heart of what they're doing, rather than just having this document in place.
Thanks, Kate. And it's very related to what Neil was saying about engaging with the communities and listening to the communities and understanding what they expect from us, and adjusting what we're doing to their expectations. I really like when you say unlearn, because there are a lot of different things that have been said in the past, and the past sometimes a very long past, and unlearning this sort of things is really important, because that completely changed the approach that we have and the perspective that we've got on the current situation. So very wise recommendations here. Kath, if I may, I would like to continue with you and ask you a question about Landly's proudest achievement in their RAP journey to date. And I'm sure the future will bring even more, but to date, what do you think would be the proudest moment for Landly's? I think you're on mute, Kath.
It's tricky. Yeah, look, I'd like to cheat and do two, but they'll be really quick. I think, you know, we partnered with Career Trackers initially, and had over 35 First Nations interns a year. So, you know, if we didn't see the skill set existing in the market, you know, over the years now we've converted more than 30 of those interns into full-time employees in Lendlease, and now we're starting to see, you know, those people start to move into middle management, because we figured that, you know, from an employment point of view, when we could get a critical mass of people, First Nations people, in those middle management jobs that are making decisions and working in the operations of the business, then, you know, we could really have great sustainability. But I also want to touch on, you know, what I'm proud of at the moment and in the latest RAP, and it's taken quite a while, and it talks to the theme of bravery, and that's our board making a public statement in terms of truth-telling about our organisation. So by nature, you know, as a constructor and a developer, we go in and we change the nature, the shape and the use of lands. And when you think of it historically, wittingly or unwittingly, along with all sorts of other organisations and institutions, we've added to the dispossession of First Nations people and the disconnection from land, you know, even though we're not developing on virgin, untouched sites, it's, you know, green sites or brown sites, as they say. But nonetheless, by the nature of what we do, this is how our organisation actually does impact these issues that Kate was talking about. So, you know, having that piece of truth telling in the organisation is important, because it also led us to the realisation that the stuff we do also enables us and gives us a very unique opportunity to build back into the design, First Nations thinking and design principles, and, you know, community involvement in co-design and co-delivery of those developments and those buildings. So, and also as part of that, we also have a very unique ability to protect language and culture and build those into those assets and buildings. So I'm not just talking about the artwork, and the artwork is part of it, but, you know, creating places. So placemaking is about not just the destination, but also how that place is activated. So what happens when people come to work there or visit there? You know, how do we engage First Nations businesses or local communities to support the tenants or the people in that place to do more? And also, you know, how do we make those places public assets of learning and knowledge around traditional First Nations culture and learning? So, you know, to create sort of an asset, if you like, on the Australian cultural heritage place, so where people can just come and learn and connect with culture, and that helps to build back to that idea I touched on in the start, that we have a shared history in terms of culture. So I think it takes a long time. I'm not saying it was easy, but it's quite, you know, to move a board in a way where they're actually admitting failures, but it also has led to opportunities. So I'd like to leave it at that. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Kath, and that's really important to be aware of the impact that we have as organisation on land and water, and that's exactly the same for Sydney Water. Neil, if I can now ask you about employment. Employment is really it is a focal point of any reconciliation action plan. So could you tell us what has worked well for you, and what advice you can share with Sydney Water and with us all to increase First Nation employee representations?
Yes, sure. Look, like Kath mentioned earlier, we have performance measures and targets against our employment, both at a national level, a regional level, and a local level. And the local level is really what gives us ownership of that. Originally, when we started the journey, it was about the recruitment team and the HR team trying to recruit as many Indigenous people as they could. And, you know, in our organisation, we can win a new contract and we've got to recruit 300 people in a month. So therefore, the challenge is volume. What we've learned over time is that we now have a dedicated Indigenous recruitment team, and they are 100% dedicated to recruiting Indigenous people and spending the time with maximising the opportunity for those people to participate. So the fact that if we still get poor resumes, or we get people applying with a form of criminal record, or people don't turn up on time to interviews, all that sort of stuff, we take them out of our main recruitment system. They go into our Indigenous employment program, and the measure might be there that can we recruit 6 people in a month, whereas a recruitment team might have to recruit 60 people in a month. So we put the time and effort in to understand that individual, their circumstances, how we can support them in the employment, and what's required for us to get them in the job. And quite often that requires us to do quite a bit of work with our clients, particularly where people have had minor criminal records, and how do we convince our clients that we can manage that risk associated with that, or there may not be any risk at all. But they're conversations we've got to have. So the performance measures have been taken out of the recruitment people's hands, and they're still a great resource. They still identify a lot of opportunities, and they get that communication out into the communities. And social media, we've had to change some of the way that we communicate. The Seek and that with Facebook now has become a big mechanism and that. And we've had to deal also with the challenges, and our RAP focus, and our current RAP focuses very much on a lot of those challenges. I mean, some of our businesses start work at 5 a.m. and if you don't have a car or you don't have a driver's license, how do you get to work at 5 a.m. and should that be a barrier to someone starting a job? And once they've been in that role for 6 months, the mateship and work colleague can probably pick them up and share some of that travel with them. So it's about working through and making sure that doesn't become a barrier to someone getting a job. And we're currently sitting at 6% Indigenous employment nationally. Our target's 6.5, and I'm very confident we'll hit 6.5%. And when we put our new RAP together, it'll be interesting to see what we sign off on for that. But it'll be an increased target. And I think over time, when we did our first RAP, we were at 2.2% employment, Indigenous employment. We went to 3.8 to 4.06 to 6% currently. So we're seeing a great steady climb, but it's now understanding that opportunity that exists in those local communities. Thank you.
That's a great story, Neil, and I think this is a fantastic. More than 6% is absolutely fantastic, and I think the fact that you've been able to adjust and to adapt and to be flexible about what you were doing is probably one of the critical factor here.
Rock, if I could just add another great story just to share with people, that we won a major contract out of Broken Hill, and with the Australian Rail Track Corporation. And the stories are really where the rubber hits the road as far as I'm concerned. You can have your systems and processes. It took 4 visits into that community to convince people to come and work for us on the railway line and that. And in that 4th recruitment, when we were able to actually hand people a letter of employment, we recruited 19 people on that one day from that local community, and 17 stayed with us for the life of the contract. Yeah, so that was an opportunity investment. We could have invested. We flew to Broken Hill 4 times. We rented cars, hotels, meals, ran workshops, but it took 4 goes, but it delivered 19 people. Just a great example of the investment we had to make in that region. Yeah, Thank you.
That's a fantastic story, Neil. Thank you. Emma, my last question. You've been passionate about Reconciliation Action Plan, and you've been one of the drivers within Sydney Water in our journey to improve our reconciliation journey. Where do you think we can be in 2 years' time? What will have we achieved?
Yeah, I listen to Neil and the targets that they've achieved and think some of mine are going to sound less brave, but are still big steps for Sydney Water. So our commitment in our RAP is about creating more economic and social opportunities for First Nations persons and businesses, and to respect and promote our First Peoples culture, particularly in relation to land and water management, as I mentioned before. And we have set targets. We currently only have 1% of our staff who identify as First Nations persons. We're committed to raising that to 3, and I'd like to see us get there in the next 2 years. Similarly, we haven't had targets associated with our expenditure directly or indirectly through our supply chain, which we are a large spender of money on running our business of providing water and wastewater and recycled water services. So we've got a target there that of 3% that I think I definitely think we can meet. But to create that, even if we were to meet that 3% employment target, I think there are other things that we are committed to working on that require the whole organisation to get on board. We've looked at a few things that suggest maybe our culture is not as inclusive as it might be. And so we have a program of cultural awareness, which we will offer a variety of different trainings through all levels of the organisations in different formats to hopefully appeal to different interests across the business to come and learn more about our First Nations culture. We'll partner that with volunteering opportunities to go and be on country with our local land councils and make improvements in the catchments that provide our water resources. And so we'd really encourage people to get on board with those activities and help us shape them as well as make them successful. We've started a process, obviously, in putting together our Reconciliation Action Plan. We've done a lot of consultation, but we were challenged in that consultation of can you walk your talk, Sydney Water? And so I definitely want to see over the next 2 years that we do walk our talk. When we were out talking to Gangandara, we identified some real things that we could actually do together. To the placemaking idea that Kath brought up, they want to work with us in naming our publicly facing assets. And if we wish to create more place or activate more place with art or other interactive notions of promoting First Nations people and culture and knowledge, they want to work with us in shaping those things in relation to our assets. But also, we run tours all of the time in the west of Sydney, and they've got a bus company, and couldn't we do a deal on that front? So I'd like to see us walk some of the talk associated with our initial stakeholder consultations. Again, to make that employment target work, we have committed to working with our existing First Nations staff to develop a strategy to recruit, retain and develop our Indigenous staff. And a little bit about what we heard Neil say earlier today, we might need to change a bunch of our we do it this way approaches in order to make that more effective and more impactful. And again, in the next 2 years, I reckon we can have channels that better suit not only our business needs, but are more attractive and better able to be participated in by the First Nations candidates we want to attract, but we also want to retain. And then I think we should continue to do, and we will continue to do, the things that we're doing today. So recognise NAIDOC Week, recognise and Reconciliation Action Week, where appropriate, smoking ceremonies, other things that are visible promotion of our commitment. So I think they're the kinds of things we should be able to achieve in the next 2 years.
I agree, Emma. I think, and there is a lot of people across the business that are really committed to make it happen. So I think sharing that and making sure that our culture is completely inclusive, it can take us a very long way. So it's been a really insightful discussion so far. I think we're going to move now into questions from the audience, because it's really important to give the opportunity to our people to ask questions, and they have asked questions. So I'm going to start with a question for Kath. Kath, the question is, what strategy and tools do you use to communicate and engage frontline staff who work remotely? Kath, you may be on mute again.
It's just the internet playing up on us. We use, I mean, most of this should be gauged, as we were talking about, in what we do, the normal things that we do and our normal business processes. So sometimes instead of an add-on, it's just doing things differently. So, you know, in your normal induction process, you know, having traditional owners come in and talk about the meaning of the country and the land, and there may or may not be cultural heritage sites there, but, you know, it just in terms of talking about the names and the nature and the language of the land, you know, having your toolbox talks and, you know, talking about key dates like National Reconciliation Week, doing things locally, as Neil said, is the most successful. So where you can marry in, you know, the community with your projects and your sites and just create that relationship before something happens. You know, often people wait to have a relationship, you know, wait till something happens and, oh my God, we need to go and fix something. But if you can have your sites and your assets in location, engaging with the traditional owners, those solutions are within the community. What the community wants to do and how to do it, those solutions are all there. So just listening and working with them and understanding in this place, this is what we think we can do together, is the best way of engaging that. And it connects our people to those workplaces and to the land they work on. Thanks.
I love it, Kath, when you say it's not an add-on, it's just part of what we do. I think that's really, really powerful. Next question is for Emma. Emma, how do we ensure that our Reconciliation Action Plan maintains integrity and equity and doesn't sorry, yeah, I get it, and doesn't just include token numbers and representations?
Yeah. I think really, really importantly, and so it is a built-in part of Reconciliation Australia's process with Reconciliation Action Plans, that we monitor and report progress on implementation to the board. But we're not going to do that just from a we must, because it's what's required of that process. We will be transparent with the organisation as a whole as to the progress we're making. We will strike barriers, so we will work with the committee and we will work with the executive team to look at removing those as we go along, but in making public to the business and to our stakeholders how we are progressing against each of our actions, I think we will provide the transparency that will hold us to account for delivering upon those, including where we face barriers, how we remove those if things take a little bit longer as a result. But we plan to be active in continuing to let everybody know how we are going against the commitments that we have made.
Very good point, Emma. And we don't want anything to be tokenistic. It has to be genuine. I've got a question for Neil here. One of our RAP commitments is to increase Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders supplier diversity to support improved economic and social outcomes. How can we influence our supply chain to have RAPs? Is it something that Broad Spectrum or Ventia has done?
Think that we have done to influence them in the past. It's certainly something that we're working on now. So it's a now activity for us. But what we have done in order to engage our suppliers more broadly in our business, we've set three major targets. One is the number of businesses that we engage with and how we increase those over each year of the RAP. The percentage of available spend that we do, so what's actually available to Indigenous businesses. And the examples there is our motor vehicle, purchase of motor vehicles aren't available to be purchased off Indigenous businesses. They're national supply agreements, etc. And what's our total spend and how do we do that? And what we've found in having some key measures, we're actually exceeding all those measures significantly. And in doing that, we are reaching deeper into the supply chain. And that's now them coming back to us saying, how can you help us? What can you do? So we've got a procurement officer from one of our suppliers is now working, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be working with the head of our procurement in Sydney on how we've managed and reported, because they've got poor reporting, how we actually report up to the board on our procurement spend and the challenges that we're facing. So it's starting to happen very deeply into the organisation now. So it's a question I would love to answer in 12 months' time. But yeah, it's allowing us, but by increasing those people that are sharing in the success of the business, we're actually reaching deeper into those. So again, I'd be encouraging people to be bold and to set some targets. I remember I had a professional argument, I suppose, with our procurement EGM when we set the targets. And he's exceeded every single one of them. So, you know, we're not afraid to set targets and we're not afraid to fail when we do set those targets, as long as we know why we have failed.
Yeah, very good point, Neil. And, you know, in the water industry, that's what we call the ripple effect, when you start small, but then you progress with your suppliers and contractors and etc. And that's an important one. There's a question for Emma. And it starts by huge respect to Lend-Lease here about the truth-telling and how this was used to constructively move forwards. Emma, do you feel this is relevant to Sydney Water?
Yes, I do think that truth-telling and understanding histories and the different perspectives and being part of a conversation to make sure that we do understand the different journeys that people have gone through to come to today and the perspectives that come with those. I do think Sydney Water has a role to play in active conversations in this space. But one of the, and it's something we've talked about a lot in the context of our cultural awareness raising materials and education, about making sure people do understand. We heard Kate earlier talk about the marked discrepancy around the rate of incarceration for our First Nations people versus other parts of the Australian society. So we've talked about in that education, helping people understand the differences in today's Australia and where they may have come from if we choose to tell the truth about histories. But one of the things I've had to unlearn or learn more about this year as well is that sometimes if we over-focus on some of those negative things, we actually run the risk of downplaying so much of the success that has also come from our First Nations culture. So there is a balancing act in how you have a conversation that is respectful and truthful to the past, but doesn't leave us stuck there and doesn't take away from the very real and demonstrable contributions to today's Australia that our First Nations people make, and we should celebrate those and profile those in a balanced sense, if that makes sense to folks.
Yeah, very good point, Emma. It's very much. I've been very often thinking that's about acknowledging the past, but embracing the future, and a future where we are together. So I think we're going to finish our discussion, and I'm sad to say that because it's been really a very good discussion. So I want to thank everyone around the table. A big thank you to Kate, to Kath, to Neil, and to Emma for taking the time to share your insight and advice on reconciliation and how we can move forward as a group of people, as a nation. It's been really helpful. It's been really insightful. I'm sure for us as Sydney Water, as an organisation, but also simply as people, there is a lot of lessons from our discussion today. And I want to thank you again for taking the time to do that today. A big thank you also to the team that has organised the event today, and to everyone. There is a lot. There's a lot coming up. Reconciliation Week is still on. We've got NAIDOC Week coming very soon, and that's when we'll be able to launch our Innovate Level Reconciliation Action Plans for Sydney Water. We're very proud of that. And as I think Emma said, this is a journey. Every day is a new start, and every day we can invent something new to make tomorrow better. So thanks everyone. Thanks again, and I wish you